Gopijana Vallabha Givardhari Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Jai. Hari Hari Bol.
Reading today from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the third canto, chapter 3. And we're taking a look at text number 11, 12, and 13. So I will just read the Sanskrit and the English of 11 and 12, and then we can look at 13 and chant the Sanskrit together and read the purport. Sambaram dvididambanam muram balvalamevacha anyangscha dhantavakratin avadit kangscha gadayat. Of kings like Shambhara, Dvivida, Vana, Mura, Balvala, and many other demons, such as Dantavakra, some he killed himself, and some he caused to be killed by others, like Shri Baladev, etc. Atate bhratriputranam bhakshayo patitandripan chachala bhukurukshetram yesham apatatambalai. Then, O Vidura, the Lord caused all the kings, both the enemies and those on the side of your fighting nephews, to be killed in the battle of Kurukshetra. All those kings were so great and strong that the earth seemed to shake as they traversed the warfield. Okay, and text number 13. Who's in control of this thing? What's happening there? Can you open this that door? You're on text?
No.
Really?
Yeah. Last time we punched button up, spoke text 8.
Interesting. Well, we'll do 13 in any case, because the major schedule is messed up. Okay, let's go to 13. Yeah.
That's the one.
Yes. 3:13. And we're back in this proper schedule. Who knocked on the door? Okay. Sakarnadu Shashana Sovalanam Kumantrapakena Hatashriya Shusham Suyodanam Sanucharam Shayanam Bhagnorumurvyam Nanananda Pashyam Sakarnadu Shashana Sovalanam Kumantrapakena Hatashriya Yusham Suyodhanam sanucharam shayanam Bhagnurumuryam nanananda pashyan Sakarnadoshashana sobalanam Kumantrapakena hatashriyayusham Suyodhanam sanucharam shayanam Bhagnurumuryam nanananda pashyan. What's happening now?
I thought it was 339.
So we're doing 313 because the schedule is wrong. So we're just going to go back onto the schedule. Otherwise it's going to be every day behind schedule. So self-study to read from 9 to 13. Okay, want to chant? Who's chanting? Sakarna dushashana sobalanam Kumantrapakena hatashriyarusham Suyodanam sanucharam sayanam Bhagnurumuryam nanananda pashyan.
Sakarna dosha sana dushan Sakarna dusha sana sobalanam Sakarna dusha sana sobalanam Kumantra patena hatashriyarusham
Kumantrapakena hatashriyarusham
Suyodanam sanucharam sayanam Bhagnoyam Udyam Nananda Pasan Sakarna Dushasan Saubalanam
Sakarna dushashana sobalanam
Kumantrapakena Hatashiyayusam
Kumantrapakena hatashriyarusham
Suyodanam Sanucharam Sayanam Bhagnoyam Nanananda Pasyan
Ladies, Sakarna dushashana sobalanam Kumantrapakena hatashriyarusham Suyodanam sanucharam shayanam Bhagnurumuryam nanananda pashyan. Sa, he, the Lord. Karna, Karna. Dushasana, Dushashana. Sobalanam, Sobala. Kumantrapakena. By the intricacy of ill advice. Hatashriya, bereft of fortune. Ayusham, duration of life. Suyodanam, Duryodhana. Sa anucharam, with followers. Shayanam, lying down. Bhagna, broken. Urum, thighs. Urvyam, very powerful. Na, did not. Nananda, take pleasure. Pashyan, seeing like that. Translation. Duryodhana was bereft of his fortune and duration of life because of the intricacy of ill advice given by Karna, Dushasana and Sobala. When he lay on the ground with his followers, his thighs broken although he was powerful, the Lord was not happy to see the scene. Purport. The fall of Duryodhana, the leading son of Dhritarashtra, was not pleasing to the Lord, although he was on the side of Arjuna, and it was he who advised Bhima how to break the thighs of Duryodhana while the fight was going on. The Lord is constrained to award punishment upon the wrongdoer, but he is not happy to award such punishments because the living entities are originally his parts and parcels. He is harder than the thunderbolt for the wrongdoer, and softer than the rose for the faithful. The wrongdoer is misled by bad associates and by ill advice, which is against the established principles of the Lord's order, and thus he becomes subject to punishment. The surest path to happiness is to live by the principles laid down by the Lord, and not disobey his established laws, which are enacted in the Vedas and the Puranas for the forgetful living entities. Om Jnanaatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagna Ragnatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakanditangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishvare Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shrivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're still reading this chapter about Uddhava summarizing the pastimes of the Lord. In this chapter, specifically the pastimes since the Lord has left Vrindavan. And we see how the Lord has caused, he caused many demons to be killed while he was on this planet. And specifically here in this verse with this purport, we're seeing how explaining how Duryodhana, the final fate of Duryodhana is explained. We see three people here called out as the advisors of Duryodhana. So Karna, Dushasana, and Sobala. And Sobala refers to the son of Subal, which was, who was the one who was the expert in dice? Huh? Shatrugni. The one who's expert in dice? The one who was throwing the dice in the dice game? What was his name again? Shakuni. Shakuni, yes. So Shakuni's father was Maharaj Subal, who was the king of Gandhara or Afghanistan, as we know it today. And we see that the people of Afghanistan, they are very powerful fighters, even up till today. Amazing that the American army, even with billions of dollars, they were there trying their best to keep it under control, but those people have a fighting spirit that is completely indomitable. And it has been like that for thousands of years. And we see that even before America was there was the Soviets, there was the British. There's somehow always fighting going on in Afghanistan. And those people are just ready for it. They don't mind. So the king of Afghanistan, Gandhara, was Maharaj Subal, and his son was Shakuni, and his daughter was Gandhari. who was then married later to Dhritarashtra. So we see in Duryodhana's life, as it is laid out here in this purport, Duryodhana ended up in his very unfortunate position at the end due to kumantra pakena, due to ill advice, due to bad advice. The problem with the material world is that we are not always sure where a course of action will lead us. That is the difficulty. That there is quite a gap between cause and effect. And it is that gap that makes it possible for us to make our own decisions. But it is also that gap that makes it possible for us to do very stupid things, and things that bring us into very horrible circumstances. Like, for example, who would smoke if the moment you pull on that cigarette, you get a tumor and you die? No one would be smoking. Impossible to smoke. But because it only happens 20 to 30 years later, to a slow accumulative process, therefore we see millions of people are smoking, even though the reality is that is the conclusion of where this will take you. But because of that gap between cause and effect, therefore the material world is very tricky. And therefore the material world is a dangerous place, because therefore it is possible to enter onto a course of action and to do certain things that will lead to your inevitable destruction. But somehow we can't see it, because it is just not happening immediately. So Duryodhana's life is very interesting, because we see that for a large portion of time, it seemed like his scheme to cheat the Pandavas out of their kingdom was actually very successful. And for many years, for 14 years in fact, he ruled happily. He ruled happily in great opulence with his friends, with Karna, Dushashana, Shobala, after they had offended Draupadi so horribly and cheated the Pandavas out of their kingdom. They had a wonderful time for 14 years, ruling Hastinapur in great opulence and royalty. And we see that every now and again they would even go, they once went and flaunted their success and their opulence, because they heard when the Pandavas were hiding in the forest. And then at that moment they actually got into a little bit of trouble. But still, we see that they felt that they had been highly successful. We see that at the end of, in the 9th chapter of the 1st canto, we see when the Pandavas, when they went to see Bhishma, who was lying on the battlefield. Bhishma exclaimed when he saw them. At that time, obviously, everything had been done. They had successfully won the war. And Bhishma exclaimed, he said, "Oh, what trials and tribulations you Pandavas have been experiencing." But then, let's see, actually I can find that verse. We see that at the end, when they went to Bhishma, the reason why they went to Bhishma is because Yudhishthira was regretful of everything that had expired, that now he had to rule the kingdom and so many people had to die. When Bhishmadev saw them there, Bhishmadev said, "Aho kashtam, aho nyayam, yat yuyam dharmanandana, jivitum narhata klishtam, vipra dharmyachyutashraya." Bhishmadev said, "Oh, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations, yet you were protected by the Brahmanas, God, and religion." So we see that even though the Pandavas were Dharmanandan, they were the sons of personified religion, somehow or other, they had actually had a very rough time, a very difficult life. Specifically those 14 years in the forest, they undergone great tribulations. But why did they undergo? How did they end up in that situation? Because they were simply being guided by Krishna, by the Brahmanas, and by Dharma. They were taking, that was the origin of their advice. That was whose advice they were taking. That's how they were charting their course of action. By the advice given by Krishna, by the Brahmanas, and by following the principles of Dharma. And therefore we see that at the end result, much later, was that the Pandavas gained ultimate success. Not just success in terms of material success, but it is that ultimate success that is attained when one conforms his character to the desires of Krishna and to the principles of Dharma, that one really gains a position in life that is eternal, that one is then as substantial wealth and success, because one's character becomes molded according to Dharma. But to see that Duryodhan, he at the end ended up in an extremely pathetic situation. Very pathetic, very sad, very depressing, in fact. At the end, when he and Bhima had fought, and Bhima broke both his thighs, and he was lying there and everything was finished. Every single one of his brothers had died. Everyone had died. The kingdom had been completely lost. He was lying there, his thighs were broken, once one of the most powerful men in the world, and there he was, lying, his thighs broken, simply awaiting death, a very slow and painful death, because he wasn't willing to be carried off the battlefield and to be healed. He wanted to just simply die there. And at that point, he was lying there, and he realized the folly of his actions. And every single one of his advisors, they had also died. Dushasana was killed by Bhima. Bhima ripped off his arm and broke open his chest and drank his blood, just like he had promised after Dushasana had dragged Draupadi by her hair to the assembly. We see Karna similarly killed at the end because he had suffered the curse given unto him by his own spiritual master for cheating, for deceiving his spiritual master. And Shakuni, I believe, was killed by, I can't remember who killed him. Maybe one of those two, yeah. So Shakuni also met his end. So therefore we see that Duryodhana and all his advisors, at the final end, they ended with it became revealed that their course was folly. But it took quite a while. It can take quite some time before our Dharma shows its true results. And it can take quite some time before the followers of Dharma, it becomes revealed the glory of those who follow Dharma. We see in the life of Srila Prabhupada something very similar. He had simply, for many, many years, continued executing what he was convinced was the right course of life, which is simply trying to preach in English and following the instructions of his spiritual master. He just did it for years, in great struggle, great difficulty, without any apparent success. But he simply continued. He continued, and then much later, actually, basically towards the final end of his life, the final 10 years of his life, final decade of his life, it was revealed that the course that he had taken was a glorious course. And many of his godbrothers were surprised because very few of them had ever taken him seriously, even before. Even we see once when he was editing the magazine of one of his godbrothers, after Prabhupada had left his family and he was staying in one of the mats of his godbrothers, and he was editing the magazine, and he caused so much disruption there because Prabhupada had these big plans. He wanted to make the magazine bigger than Newsweek or Time. And he was like gathering donations, and he wanted to start printing in color and all these things. And then this letter came from his godbrother. He said, maybe you should go find another place to live and another service, because actually we're not interested in expanding this magazine. We are happy with just printing 50 copies a month in black and white, 4 pages, and you are actually causing us discomfort. He didn't say it like that, he said it in a very nice way, but that is basically the gist of his message. And Prabhupada again had to find another place. So the point is that in living in the material world, we have to live according to principles. You have to be very clear what are your principles, and you have to stick to those principles. And you have to understand that you have no idea where exactly principles will lead, exactly, step by step, and what will happen when you follow these principles. But you have to have faith that these principles will lead me to an ultimate good destination. Not just when I die, I will go to heaven, but just even your life will ultimately become something that is glorious and wonderful if you stick to those principles. But it is very difficult to stick to the principles of Dharma if one is not being advised by followers of Dharma. So we see that Duryodhana, he was advised by Karna, Dushasana, and Shakuni. And if we look at all 3 of these, why are they ill advisors? Because all 3 of these were themselves had ulterior motives. Their desires were ultimately, Karna's desire, ultimate desire, was for fame and glory. And his only goal was to kill Arjuna. That was what he was interested in. He just simply wanted to kill Arjuna for fame and glory. We see that Dushasana, he was motivated simply by lust for Draupadi. Therefore, he was so willing to go drag her out of the assembly. We see that Shakuni, if we know the real story, he was ultimately actually interested in destroying the whole Kaurava dynasty in retaliation for what they had done to his family. So Duryodhana was advised by these people who actually, none of them had his benefit at heart. They were all self-motivated. So what happens is, why is it so important to have good advisors? Is because the living being is ultimately, as we said, he is tatashta. He is open to suggestion, as what Sheshika Prabhu says. He's very easily influenced by other people, by desires. Because whichever course of action you take, whether adharmic or dharmic, every now and again, all of us, every single person that exists in this world, will have moments of doubt, where you are wondering, is this the right course of action? Is this where I'm supposed to be going? Even for those who follow Dharma, you see that it's not always clear in your life. You will also at a certain point, in the pursuit of executing the desires of your spiritual master and living according to the principles of Dharma, you will experience sometimes periods of confusion, where you're not sure, what is my next step? What should I do? Should I change ashrams? Should I go live here? Should I do that? Is these the right people I should be hanging out with? Very regularly, even the devotee has to question, where is he and what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I not now taking a bad course of action? So whenever we experience our moments of that moment, that we will be influenced by those who are closest to us. When one is in doubt, one is in a very influenceable position to be easily influenced. Because one is not sure anymore which way to go. So therefore we see Duryodhana, even he at a certain point, had his moments of doubt. Whether is this actually the right course of action? But then because he was surrounded by Karna, Dushasana and Shakuni, then even in those moments where he was doubting, then he was affirmed to go forward unto his ultimate destruction. We see Kamsa even, after Krishna had killed Keshi, when the news had reached Kamsa, it is explained that Kamsa for a moment, he thought, my God, this Krishna is so powerful. Maybe I should just surrender to him. Why am I'm trying to fight him? Maybe I should just surrender to him. But then he thought, what would all my demon friends say if I surrendered to Krishna? It would be so embarrassing. No, I can't do this. I'd rather just, let's go. This is not an option for me. So by the power of Sangha, by the power of association, one gets advised to a certain course. So therefore one has to be careful, and one has to very carefully choose his advisors. Because some of our main decisions in life, the reality is that even though we might not be making such nefarious plans or something that will influence the course of the whole human history, we do make certain decisions that will influence the rest of our life. Some of our main decisions even. Who will I marry? Where will I live? What work will I do? And what will be my service? So these questions have to be very carefully answered, because it is very easy to make wrong decisions in this regard. You see someone choose the wrong person to marry, and then a few years you have a divorce, costs a lot of money, so much confusion, so much effort is wasted. We see that some people, they choose the wrong occupation. They don't choose the right occupation, they're not properly prepared for work. And why is it? It's very interesting when you see when people make these wrong decisions. It's because we are, for a certain extent, not able to be honest with ourselves, not able to be honest about our position. We see that many people, they don't embrace the realities, for example, of what it means to live in the material world. The material world means that one has to work. So oftentimes, like Prabhupada would explain, people get cheated because they have a cheating mentality. People want to get something cheaper for what it really is. So in spiritual life, false gurus, they can attain success because people want to hear that you can have it for free. You can become God. You just chant this mantra for a few months and you become God. It's a completely ridiculous proposal. But people are cheated because they like the idea of getting something for so cheap. Similarly, if you would sometimes, sometimes to the airport. I don't know if they do this anymore, but they used to do it, where they would sell fake Rolexes. A fake Rolex. So Rolex is a lot of money, but then someone would stop you at the airport and they say, hey, look at what I have here. This is a Rolex. And they would indicate that this is a stolen Rolex. Therefore, they can give it to you for very, very cheap. So because we think, oh wow, well, I mean, this is a Rolex, it can be very cheap. But they know, it's very clear this is a stolen watch. Then you think, well, it's just my lucky day. I can get a Rolex for $1,000. And you buy that Rolex and you feel, oh wow, I was successful. But 2 months later, the thing breaks and then you realize it wasn't a stolen watch, it was actually a knockoff. But they caught you because you knew it was stolen. But you thought that now I can get something very expensive for very cheap. And therefore your intelligence becomes covered over. We see also that the same happens now with investment. Like I know many people who lost a lot of money in Bitcoin. They put all their money in Bitcoin because the idea is there that I can just put all my money in Bitcoin and then I'm going to become a millionaire. And that hope is there. People think I can get so much money for no work. And therefore people become blind and stupid because of that cheating propensity. So we ultimately cheat ourselves. So the similar thing happens when people choose an occupation. People think that I want a work in which I will get the most money for the least amount of effort. And then people choose oftentimes the wrong course of action. Instead of choosing an occupation, Krishna's guidance is that you choose an occupation that is in harmony with your nature. Doesn't at all matter how much money you're going to get or how much prestige you're going to get in society. If you choose an occupation that is in harmony with your nature, then that is Krishna's suggestion for you. Because then it's possible to gain some sense of satisfaction from your occupation. And then your occupation will ultimately have the best results. So because we are not able to make these decisions honestly, we end up in very difficult situations. So therefore, the big principle, what we again and again see emphasized in the Bhagavatam, is the reality that we have to chart our course of action in this world by the assistance of firstly understanding the principles of Dharma. That Krishna has given us certain principles to guide us, things that are unfailing. The 4 regulative principles, for example, give us such a strong framework for our life that is just clear. If I live within this framework, I will receive great protection from the age of Kali. But these principles of Dharma naturally go much further. Honesty, austerity, compassion, and cleanliness. These principles are supposed to guide us. But in addition to these principles, we have the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas naturally. And then also Krishna himself in the heart. We understand that if one is sincerely practicing Krishna consciousness and taking shelter of the process of devotional service, then Krishna will also reveal within the heart. He will give us the intelligence by which we can successfully navigate our course of action within this world. And that is essential for us to understand that it is impossible to make the best decisions in life unless we have this proper guidance. And that we have to be extremely careful about being guided by people that have ulterior motives and people that do not actually have our best interest at heart. By exposing our mind to people like that and asking for their advice, specifically when we are in periods of doubt, of doubting our own course of action. That is a very dangerous thing to do, to expose your doubts to people that are not actually your complete well-wishers and people that are not actually well situated on the path of following Dharma and following Krishna's direction. Then one can end up by kumantra pakena, by the intricacies that are caused by ill advice. One can also end up in a position in which one is hata shriya ayusham, in which one becomes bereft of good fortune and one's duration of life. And we can see it time and time again, specifically in the modern world, where there are so many authorities out there that are telling us certain things that, if followed, will ultimately not lead to a good result. And we see Krishna was not actually happy. Nananda, seeing Duryodhana in that position, he was not happy about it. So Krishna sets up these principles, as Prabhupada said, the wrongdoer is misled by bad association and by ill advice, which is against the principles, established principles of the Lord's order, and thus he becomes subject to punishment. But the Lord is not happy to award such punishment, but he does it for their ultimate benefit. So Krishna's actual pleasure is if we are properly guided by the principles of Dharma, and we attain success in life, and we attain successful character, and move towards a position in which we are always under the shelter of the Brahmanas, the principles of Dharma, and Krishna himself. That is actually what makes Krishna happy. And therefore also those individuals that reach out to other people and try to bring them under the shelter of Dharma, the principles of Dharma, and under the shelter of the Vaishnavas and the Brahmanas, these people, therefore Krishna explains that they are his dearmost servitors, because they're actually doing something that brings Krishna great pleasure. Whenever individuals, to bring people to the protection of Dharma, is the greatest welfare work, as Prabhupada explained it. Okay, let us hear if there are any questions or any comments or anything said about the verse. You can also share with us if there is something interesting that you will remember. Yes, Manoj.
Well, one thing that came to my mind as you were discussing this verse is in the fifth canto, fifth chapter, we have Rishabdev, his 100 sons, Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahor Vimuktis Tamo Dwaram Yojitam Sangi Sangam Mahantas Te Sama Chitta Pranata Vimanyava Surida Sadavoye. That one can attain the path of liberation from material bondage only by rendering service to highly advanced spiritual personalities. These personalities are impersonalists and devotees. Whether one wants to merge with the Lord's existence or wants to associate with the personality of God, one should render service to the Mahatma. For those who are not interested in such activities, who associate with people who are fond of women and sex, the path to hell is wide open. The Mahatmas are equal poised. They do not see any difference between one living entity and another. They are very peaceful, and they're fully engaged in devotional service. They are devoid of anger, and they work for the benefit of everyone. They do not behave in any abominable way. Such people are known as Mahatmas. So we have this doorway of Dwaram. You know, the doorway to spiritual life is opened by serving the Mahatmas, and the door to hell is opened by associating with Yojita Sangam, you know, people who are fond of sex life. So it's kind of the same theme that we're discussing here. Of course, the intricacies of karma are described in the Nectar of Devotion, where we find out that when a person performs a sinful action, one of the immediate reactions we get is the desire to perform that sinful action a second time. And so that's where we get this cycle of people performing the wrong action many, many times. And this cycles through. So you do something wrong, you get a taste from doing it wrong, you do it again, and this continues to grow until finally it moves from the aparubdha to the prarubdha stage, where the actual karmic result becomes manifest. So you have the bija stage, there is the desire to do something wrong. And then there's the kutta phase, where we have the desire to repeat it again. And then that's within the aparabdha stage, so it cycles and cycles, like a person smoking, and then finally, at a certain point, the parabdha stage happens, like for Duryodhana, he had performed many envious and, adharmic activities directed against the Pandavas and against others. And he got away with it, but eventually, like as Bhishma Dev tells Yudhisthira as he's dying on the battlefield, that a person, when they've performed a lot of bad karma, then at some point they become mad and they do even more bad karma just before everything crashes down on them, which is, he was describing Duryodhana's situation.
Thank you, Manish. Anyone else? Gopal Champu.
I was thinking that just this point of when one is in doubt, to really take shelter of those who are following properly is so important. You mentioned we're in a vulnerable position, so therefore, in that position, people can take advantage and kind of use you for their own thing, if like not seeing your best interest. So it's very important to have mentors and senior devotees that we're close with, and that we understand that they actually have our best interests in mind.
Yeah, and especially to understand that people can cheat us with good intentions. Like people, because of their own ignorance, they will look at you, you will ask them what is best for me, and they will very sincerely explain to you what is best for you. But their own conception of what is best is bad. So they think, for example, you can see, let's think about some examples here. If you look, speaking yesterday with Dylan in the realm of diets, if you think about how in the world of health, so many differing opinions on what is healthy and what is not. And some people can get into these extreme diets, like we speak about the raw food people. So there's this specific form of raw fruitarians, people who think that we're only supposed to eat fruit, and they're completely convinced about it. They're completely convinced that the only thing you should eat is just fruit, nothing else. And if you eat grains or dal, you're going to go straight to, you're going to be destroyed, You're going to just get cancer, everything is going to be finished. And they're completely convinced, fanatic about this thing. So these people, they will preach it, but they're not thinking that they're going to ruin your health. They're thinking that they're going to benefit you, and if you get onto this program, then everything will be okay. And they're totally convinced about it. So the thing is that people can cheat you, it's not that they want to harm you, they actually are thinking that they will benefit you. But because their ideas are contaminated and wrong, therefore you will still get a bad result. So good intentions, as Prabhupada said. And therefore the problem in the material world is that sometimes we get, because we look at a person and we think, this person as obviously has good intentions, so maybe their advice is good. But unfortunately it does not work like that. Good intentions does not actually guarantee any positive result at all. And some of the worst things in history were committed with very good intentions. Look at many things, people, even something like genocide. It comes from people who have the desire, they think, this is how we're going to make the world a perfect place. We just have to, kill all these people and then everything will be perfect. Yeah, exactly. So, good intentions or the desire to somehow bring a better condition, the material world guarantees nothing. And when it comes to seeking advice, one has to be very, very careful. And even the reality is that also even in devotional service, we see that many places, just because someone is a devotee, one also has to be careful. Just because someone wears tilak and a dhoti also doesn't necessarily mean that one should follow their advice completely. Rupa Goswami explains in the Nectar of Instruction that one has to differentiate between the ways of devotees. And if someone is chanting Hare Krishna and he is sincere, then we respect him. He says, yes, this person, he is on the right course of life. He has taken shelter of the holy name, so we respect him. But it doesn't mean that you surrender your life to him and do everything they say, because even sometimes people who come, they can give you all kinds of advice that are not necessarily so productive. So one has to be careful. One has to clearly know where one's loyalties lie. You have to know who you are loyal to. To know very clearly where is my loyalty lie, and where is my shelter, who is my spiritual master, and make sure that that regard is like that. We see that, for example, that's why when Prabhupada saw some of his disciples went to India and they were associating with other Vaishnavas, other nice devotees in India, Prabhupada's God brothers, Prabhupada he warned them all. So you have to be careful, because then these people, they were also seen, oh, these are also Vaishnavas, and we see that's what happened in the first time. And then these devotees became confused about where does their loyalty lie. Because the point is, you can only have one spiritual master. You have to know who is your spiritual master and where do your loyalties lie. So loyalty is a very tricky thing, something that has to be carefully protected. Once one is clear about where one's loyalties lie, then things become much simpler. But until one's loyalties are not clarified, then very difficult to get any fixed course of action in life. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Dylan.
How can we rise above the propensity to cheat?
How can we rise above the propensity to cheat? To cheat others or to cheat yourself? Both. Well, the first thing I guess is that one has to realize that it is there. So one has to become a little skeptical. The first thing, someone who is interested in overcoming the propensity to cheat should become a little skeptical about his own convictions. We see that a Vaishnava, even an advanced Vaishnava, the humility of the Vaishnava is consistent, because the Vaishnava is always trying to consider, is this me? Is this my mind? Or is this the reality? Is this Krishna? And we see that even highly advanced devotees, they would also, the principle that whatever they do has to be confirmed by who it is that they're taking shelter of. We see that Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, we see even them, whenever they write a work, whenever they write some kind of, they will dedicate it to someone. Say, this is the Vaishnava under whose shelter I have written this work. See that Rupa Goswami, he considered Sanatana, his elder brother, and this is for his pleasure that they wrote this. But that also meant that they would read it. They would read one another's work, and so even advanced Vaishnavas would be always trying to make sure that whatever they did was somehow protected in the right course of action. So therefore one has to understand, to overcome the propensity to cheat, one has to be strongly sheltered, under protection, because you cannot protect yourself from your own tendency to cheat yourself and to cheat others. It's very, very strong. So therefore, by taking shelter of bona fide authorities we trust, that is how one becomes protected from this propensity. And also we see that Vaishnava etiquette also really helps. See that, for example, in the presence of one's spiritual master, one should never instruct another person in the presence of one's spiritual master, or in the presence of a devotee who one considers senior to one. You should never instruct someone. In Kali Yuga, we see people very, very easily give away advice. Very easily. They give it, you don't even have to ask for it. They'll give it to you. These people will tell you, but like serious things people will advise you on. They'll be like, no, you should marry this person. This is going to be good for you, because this and this and this. But that's very serious. It's a serious decision in life. Or people will tell you, well, actually, maybe you should do this. You should do this in this job. Or they'll tell you that you should do. But advice is a very serious thing. You give someone advice. If someone follows that advice, then you will share in the reaction of that. So in Kali Yuga, people distribute advice very freely. So that's one thing that we have to stop doing. One has to be careful to give advice away so freely. I know one devotee who was staying here actually in our temple, very senior Vaishnava, very nice person. And one day we had a discussion, he was staying here for a while, and one day we sat with him and had a discussion with him, and I asked him for some advice. And then he started to give me this whole list. telling me all these things that he is seeing, that what we're doing, which is not correct, and which he was thinking that we can improve. And at the end I asked him, I said, why didn't you, we've been here for so many weeks, why didn't you tell me anything before? And he looked at me shocked. He's like, Prabhuji, if someone doesn't ask, I will never say anything. I will never give advice if it is not asked. I will never give someone advice if they don't ask me for it. Who am I to just tell people what to do? But if you come and you ask me advice as a Vaishnava, it is my duty. His principle was that if a devotee comes and he asks me for shelter, then it is my duty to give him whatever I have understood from my authorities. But I will never just give it freely if someone doesn't ask for it. So that's one thing, to be a little reserved by how freely we tell other people what to do, what we think that they should do. Because even if you look at your own life, if you think a year ago, even just 1 year ago, if you think that there are certain things 1 year ago that you were fully convinced about, and now looking back, you realize it was actually wrong. You realize actually it's not really like that. So 1 year ago, you were fully convinced about it, and you would have also told other people that this is the way it is. And now looking back, you realize actually you were wrong. It's not really correct. So therefore, one has to be careful to share one's convictions very freely, unless that convictions are really based on scripture and based on authority. And the second thing is that one has to have to oneself avoid to be cheated. You have to have your own authorities that can protect you. That can guide you, people that you trust, that you run your decisions past. To ask them, do you think this is what I'm thinking, this is my idea behind it, what do you think? Do you have any insights for me? And these are not just necessarily devotees that are very far from us, can also be devotees that are close to us. Like friends can also guide one another, peers also can give one a certain sense of protection from cheating. Because your friends, they are ultimately the ones that can tell it to you very straight. That's the nice thing with peer association, is that peers, they don't have to hide it. If you do something stupid, your friends can be the ones to say, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? They see you doing something that you're not supposed to be doing. So in this way, we are protected from the cheating propensity by others. You cannot protect yourself from that propensity. Just like you cannot lift yourself up, grab yourself in the back of the collar and lift yourself up. It doesn't work, you have nothing to stand on. So, and it is something that we also have to continually work on, because the principle is that while we are in the material world and inhabiting a material body and mind, we are always open to be cheated and open to be a cheater. It can happen very, very easily. So that constant kind of, constantly taking shelter of Krishna and the culture of devotional service is the only way in which one can stay protected from that tendency. And also to value it, to understand the gloriousness of if you can actually overcome this cheating propensity, what a noble goal it is, and what a valuable contribution you can make to the world. You see that Srila Prabhupada, many people, by meeting him, the first thing they understood is that here is a person that will not cheat me. You see, many disciples, they had that experience. The first time they heard Prabhupada speak, or they met him, they had this understanding that this person, he is really interested in my welfare. And he has no desire, you could feel it, that this person is not interested, he will not cheat me. What he's saying is true. So that is a very powerful thing to be. And now, many of Prabhupada's disciples and followers, they all have that quality because of really investing for a long period of time in their own purification and in following proper principles. So firstly, I think if one can also just at least value that as a goal, that let me see if I can break out of this cycle of the cheaters and the cheated. Let me make that a goal in life. That also will keep us motivated. And then whenever we do fall prey to that, we are honest enough to acknowledge it and say, whoops, it happened again. But at least I will try better next time. Any other final comments? Gopal Champu.
Just a story in this regard. The cheating propensity. One time Subhav Maharaj gave me a really nice lesson in this. And he was He was at the Bhakti Center and I just arrived. He was on a layover flight. He went into the bathroom and he hit his foot on some radiator, and his foot got a cut on it. He came out of the bathroom and I was sitting there. He said, Gopal, you see my foot is bleeding. I hit it on some radiator. Do you think he'll get infected? And I said, Maharaj, I don't think he'll get infected. And he just immediately, are you a doctor? Are you a doctor? I said, no, Maharaj. So why are you giving me your opinion? You just say, I don't know. He said, don't give me your opinion. Say, I don't know. Stop trying to cheat.
Yes. Prabhupada also did the same thing sometimes. He used to ask the disciple, and the disciple would say, I think it is like this. And then Prabhupada says, you think? He says, if you think, that means you don't know. And then you just say, I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay. I think we can end here. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanande.